Ahoy, mateys! Today, on Dr. Vitka's Myths, Legends, and Lore, we're going to Gloucester, Massachusetts, in search of the famous Gloucester sea serpent. Stick around. The ocean. Since the dawn of time, the ocean has been a place of mystery and inspiration. It's easy to imagine beneath these crashing waves, creatures lurk. Giant sea snakes, serpents, prehistoric dinosaurs. Is it so hard to imagine that they might be beneath the waves right now? We think of sea monsters as fairy tales, stories, things bored sailors told to pass the time. But what if I told you that in the early 1800s, the seaside village of Gloucester, Massachusetts was gripped by a very real sea serpent mania? Did something really come up from the depths to terrorize the village? For thousands of years, the area that became Gloucester, Massachusetts was occupied by various indigenous societies. Then, like always, the English came. They established the Massachusetts Bay Colony right here in Gloucester. But living in Gloucester in the 1600s sucked for the Englishmen. The soil was too rocky to farm. The temperature was freezing cold, and the colonists were frigid Puritans. The best thing you could say about Gloucester in the 1600s was, well, at least we're not in Salem. Nobody's going to get hanged today. But then the Gloucestermen discovered something special about Gloucester: the bounty of the sea. A man could go to sea penniless and return to port with a fortune's worth of fish. And where there are fish, there are fish stories. And the biggest fish story of them all just might be the Gloucester sea serpent. In 1638, the Gloucester sea serpent officially became part of recorded American history. One Dr. Jocelyn, recently arrived from England, was warned when he arrived in Gloucester of the Gloucester sea serpent. He was told a tale of two other Englishmen who were pulling their ship into Gloucester Harbor with the help of two Native American guides. As they were coming into port, they all saw upon a rock a tremendous coiled serpent, a huge brown scaly beast, so big it was devouring a sea lion. Well, the English's first impulse was to shoot the thing, but the natives said, no, don't. If you take aim and shoot it, unless you kill it immediately with the first shot, it'll become enraged and kill all of us. Well, the English really wanted to kill the creature, but the fear the natives had eventually dissuaded them. But they watched the thing sun itself on the rock. They watched it devour the entire sea lion and then slink back beneath the waves. When they got back into port, they were still shaking. They were terrified, and they told everyone who'd listen about the bizarre beast with the long, snaky body and the weird turtle face. I don't know what they actually saw, but apparently their fear was real enough that Dr. Jocelyn took note and wrote about it and sent it to everyone who'd listen. The Gloucester sea serpent had officially arrived. Sea serpents seem like a relic of the past. However, strange things do still occasionally surface in the present day. When I started working on this video, I mentioned the story to my mother, and she says that in the 1970s, in the same area where we explored, a tremendous carcass washed up onto the beach. People came from miles around to look at the thing and poke it with sticks. Everybody thought it was a sea serpent. People thought perhaps it was even the legendary Gloucester sea serpent. They never found out exactly what it really was. Eventually, the consensus was it was a dead whale carcass, but to some people, they thought they'd seen the remains of the Gloucester sea serpent. This is exciting. Right as we were packing up to leave, I noticed something in the ocean. It's probably just buoys bobbing up and down. Maybe it's seals. I don't think it's seals because they were just in the same place up and down, But this is very reminiscent of how the Gloucester sea serpent's body was actually described. Some witnesses described it as being barrels, looking like barrels, humping up and down, claiming it was the undulating motion of the sea snake. If you look right there in the water, doesn't it look just like what they described? The up and down motion of the barrels? At first, I thought that might have been the Gloucester sea serpent, but upon closer looking, it's just buoys. Perhaps that's what happened in 1817. People saw buoys bobbing up and down, or natural phenomena, and let their imagination run wild. I know for a split second, I was convinced I saw something. Until 1817, the Gloucester sea serpent seemed content to remain a local legend. Occasionally, it would poke its head up from the waves to scare sailors. That was about it. But in 1817, it went public in a big way. The first August 1817 sighting was by two women. They saw it frolicking in the waves and went back to town to tell everybody about it, all excited. But nobody really took them seriously. It was 1817 and they were women. Oh, these crazy ladies and their sea monsters. Nobody believed them. But then other, more reliable witnesses started to come forward. By the dozens. People were seeing this creature almost every day. They would watch it frolic in the surf. They would see it fight off sharks. They say it would come barreling towards boats, then go underneath and resurface on the other side at just the very last minute. It was described as having a head like a dog. They say it had a head like a seal. They also said it moved in two different directions at once and had a tremendous spike on its tail. The whole thing sounds absurd. But the thing is, people were seeing something. It wasn't imaginary. There was something in the water in Gloucester. There were miles of newspaper reports about this thing. It became so popular, they even wrote a play about it. People would come to camp out on the shore and have sea serpent watching parties, that hire boats and get binoculars, and everybody came away with a good story to tell about seeing the thing. Strangely, though, it was more a figure of fun rather than a figure of fear. Many towns, when gripped by cryptid fever, freak out. But the people in Gloucester seemed to be enjoying their new visitor. The Gloucester sea serpent became something of a figure of fun, almost a mascot of the city of Gloucester. People were glad to see him. While the Gloucester sea serpent tended to arouse more curiosity than fear, there's always those jerks who need to kill something to prove its existence. And in the case of the Gloucester sea serpent, that was a man named Matthew Gaffney. Gaffney was hired to come in and bring the sea serpent in dead or alive, preferably dead. Gaffney was described as a swaggering ship's carpenter, a man about town, a bachelor. I picture him as kind of like Gaston from the Beauty and the Beast cartoon. Gaffney was a sure shot, and he was the one who was gonna kill the serpent. He got his crew, he got his boat, he went to sea, stalking his prey. Then he saw it. The serpent came up from the ocean, and they locked eyes. He took his rifle and aimed at the sea serpent. The serpent regarded him, and Gaffney shot one perfect bullet right into the creature's head. But it didn't kill him. Rather than sink beneath the waves and die, the sea serpent came barreling right at Gaffney in the boat. He thought he was going to die. The serpent's mouth opened wide, and right before it swallowed him, it plunged beneath the waves. For a second, time stood still. The men in the boat were paralyzed with anticipation. Had they killed it? Had they succeeded? Well, at least they were happy they'd survived the experience. But then, with a tremendous splash, it reared up from the ocean on the other side of the boat. Gaffney described it as not even seeming to care that it had been shot. He said it continued to play as it had before. And it went on about its business. That was the last he'd ever see of the Gloucester sea serpent. Gaffney went to his grave, knowing that somehow that day he'd cheated death. For whatever reason, Despite his aggression, the serpent had spared his life. Sea serpent mania was raging. People were struck with sea serpent fever. Gloucester was quickly becoming a cryptid town, and whether the creature was a monster or a natural phenomena didn't really matter. People were enjoying it, and there was something strange in the ocean. It was fun. But then it got political, and everybody's good time was ruined. In Boston, there was a group of amateur scientists called the Linnaean Society. Their stated mission was to catalog every living creature on Earth. They were a natural history society. But what it sounds like to me, more than anything else, these were a bunch of rich guys who liked to sit around in their clubhouses drinking brandy and talking about their mostly imaginary safaris. The Linnaean Society became obsessed with the idea of proving the existence of the Gloucester sea serpent, not just for the advancement of scientific knowledge, but because they wanted to shove it in the face of the American South. There had been an ongoing feud between the North and the South about who had better fossils and natural history. In fact, famous American patriot and president Thomas Jefferson was always bragging that the South was the place to go for fossils. He'd turned his entire mansion, Monticello, into what amounted to a natural history museum, filling it with mammoth skulls and dinosaur bones. And the Linnaean Society thought they'd be able to shut up Jefferson if they could prove that Massachusetts had a real live sea monster on its hands. Boston is the place to go for fossils. We do not just have beans in Boston, we have the best dinosaurs. The Linnaean Society was ready. They were going to show the world the Gloucester sea serpent was real, and they were going to shut up Jefferson for once and for all. They'd interviewed dozens of eyewitnesses. They'd compared the sea serpent sightings to the fossil records, and they had a book ready to go. Then they got word that they were receiving a specimen. They were being sent the remains of a baby sea serpent from Gloucester. They were told that the package that was arriving had irrefutable proof that the creature was real. The box arrived in the mail. It was laid out on a table, and all the scientists gathered around. They cut the box open and shook it out. Once they saw what was in the box, they all let out a dejected sigh. It wasn't a baby sea serpent they saw. What was inside the box was a dead snake, a black racer, something that everybody who lived in Massachusetts in 1817 would have been familiar with. Maybe a little bit lumpy and deformed, but nothing they hadn't seen before. Just a snake. But they'd already gone too far to stop now. They had to publish the book. They'd already told the media that they had the specimen on hand and were going to unveil it to everybody. This kind of sounds like that thing with the alien mummies from the news this past summer. They had to go along with the specimen. They had to pretend it really was the sea monster. They even came up with a scientific name for it, which translates to the Atlantic Humpty Snake. They published the book, and nobody cared. People saw through the Humpty Snake and realized it was just a dead snake, just a dead, deformed black racer somebody had picked up out of the dirt. The Gloucester sea serpent story was effectively killed, and so was the Linnaean Society, all because of one dead snake. So just what was the Gloucester sea serpent? I told you the story about it, but what were people actually seeing? There's plenty of different theories as to the Gloucester sea serpent's origin, and one particular skeptic thinks he has it figured out. A guy named Now, is the kind of skeptic who likes to suck the fun out of everything, but he does have a pretty intriguing idea as to the explanation of the Gloucester sea serpent. He says It was a narwhal. The reason the narwhal theory was posited in the first place is because some witnesses say that the Gloucester sea serpent had a stinger, a spike on the end of its tail. Well, if you've seen a narwhal, you know that they do have a big, long, curly spike, but it's not on their tail. It's on the top of their head. So what were people actually seeing if they did indeed see a spike coming out of the water during the Gloucester sea serpent sightings? Well, have you ever seen a whale's penis? There's a lot of whales in Gloucester. A lot more whales than narwhals. In fact, narwhals don't live around here. And whales frolic in the Gloucester surf on a daily basis. So if indeed anybody did see a strange spike poking out of the water, I bet it was a whale's penis. Let's cross the narwhal off the list. Another explanation is that it could have been seals. Now, think about it. Seals look like this. And sea serpents are supposed to look like this. So how do you confuse this for this? Well, it's all in the motion. They say that the Gloucester sea serpent would go up and down and up and down. You can see sort of humps in the water when multiple seals move around and interact. You do see the humps. Each seal becomes its own hump, and a whole bunch of seals playing in a line could very much give the illusion of the humps of a sea monster emerging and diving, emerging and diving. We know people were seeing something, and I think if it really was a non-sea serpent animal, if it wasn't a dinosaur or something, my best guess is it would be a seal, or a whole bunch of seals creating the illusion based on the way they move in the water. Now, while the narwhal explanation is out, the Linnaean Society's stupid snake is out. And personally, I love seals, so if it has to be conventional, I'll give it to the seals. But I'd like to believe, and I choose to believe, that it was, in fact, a sea monster. There are still places in the ocean that have remained unexplored for millions of years. And is it so hard to believe that perhaps deep in the depths there are tremendous antediluvian snakes? And is it so hard to believe that perhaps for one summer in 1817, one of them rose up to terrorize and entertain Gloucester, Massachusetts? Yes, it's my official position that the Gloucester sea serpent was, in fact, something unexplainable. If you want more information about the Gloucester sea serpent, I highly recommend coming here to the Cape Ann Museum in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Not only do they have this glorious sculpture of the Gloucester sea serpent, down in their archives, they have an amazing repository of handwritten eyewitness records of the creature and the various sightings. They were kind enough to actually let us go through some of those, and their help with the research was invaluable for us putting together the video about the Gloucester sea serpent. Also, this book right here, coincidentally purchased at the museum, was also quite useful for our research, and I'd highly recommend everybody checking it out. Make sure you like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. I feel like I'm hypnotizing you. Like and subscribe. And go to Gloucester. Watch the playful seals. Look out for the sea serpent. And just maybe, you might see a horny whale peeking up at you. Like and subscribe, or else.